Information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome to the future indeed. It's time for the only coast-to-coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here as the host. And folks, I'm so excited for today's show. We're starting a whole series on customer experience, or the experience in general. We're going to be talking to my good buddy Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research and Jaime Meritt, a very clever guy from a company called Verint. We're going to talk about AI. We'll talk about a maturity model, really talk about practical uses of artificial intelligence. So what's really happening out there? And as you've heard probably on the show before, if you're a regular listener, we always talk about how the media narrative on AI is really quite incorrect. So when you hear about AI in the media, it tends to be the big, broad, deep learning, red-eyed robot stuff that's going to take over the world. That's not what's happening out there at all. Now, you do have some really compelling artificial intelligence technologies in self-driving cars, for example. Serious business. You can imagine the amount of data that's needed, the amount of algorithms, the amount of training, the amount of research that goes into all this stuff, the sensors everywhere. It's just tremendous. And they're really getting somewhere these days. But the rest of the AI world tends to be pretty narrow and focused. In fact, that's even a term that is used, narrow AI. And what they're talking about is using artificial intelligence for a very specific purpose in your company. So I'll throw this out there, some ideas, and we'll see if Dion agrees with me and Jaime when he comes in later. But from my research, AI typically falls into two main categories in terms of what it does. One is classification. So what is this object? Is this a name? Is this a hot dog? Is this a street corner? And the other is really optimization of a decision. So a decision point like pricing. What is the optimal pricing for this widget based on market demand, for example, based upon how many we have, how much we want to make, all these things. There are factors that can go into the algorithm itself that helps you optimize pricing. So those are the two main categories. If you look around, AI is everywhere now, folks, and that's largely because of Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these big tech companies that have been really just taking over the scene the last 20 years. I think about LinkedIn. Remember the Who's Who business directory? Anyone old enough to remember that? Where'd those guys go? Nowhere. It's not, I mean, it's not even, it does exist still, believe it or not, but come on. LinkedIn has just taken over in classic style, and they dominate the market. Facebook dominates theirs, Instagram dominates theirs. All these guys are using the daylights out of AI for all kinds of reasons to optimize databases, to optimize data in the databases or the data sources, right? To know who to market to, when to market to. Lots of different ways you can use it. The key is to be focused, be practical, and have realistic expectations about what you can get. And as we'll hear from Jaime later on, you need to know what you want to get from it. You can't just go buy some AI and hope that things work out. You have to try to achieve something very specific and know what that outcome looks like. So with that, without further ado, let's bring in Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research, a real expert in this field, not just in how the AI works, but when it works and when it doesn't work. So with that, Dion, welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about yourself and your research, and what do you see happening in the world of practical, reasonable AI?
Sure, thanks. So I'm VP and Principal Analyst with Constellation Research. I focus on the future of work and all things having to do with the Chief Information Officer. That's who really manages technology in our organizations. And I've been tracking automation and artificial intelligence as a major trend in how we are improving our businesses, how we're making decisions. You talked about things like classification, but really, using AI to really analyze all the things we don't have time to analyze. We're swamped in data. And we're just the beginning of the story over the next 10 or 20 years. We're gonna have much more information flowing into our organizations continually, via all these devices that we're always connected to, all these customers we're always connected to around the clock. And so about a year ago, I surveyed the top 100 chief information officers, who I thought the top 100 were, and pestered them until they said, well, I asked them, what are you going to be using? What technology are you going to be using to improve value in your organization, using what you have already today, the data and the systems you have today? What are you going to be using most? And way at the top of the list was automation and AI. That's how they plan on getting value out of their businesses. We're greatly underexploiting the knowledge stores, the information, the databases. We just have this stuff sitting around and we're not using it in all these places because we simply don't have time. One of the big issues we ran into when the first analytics and automated reporting systems came out is it swamped the humans. They didn't have time to action all of this information.
Wow.
They would be completely paralyzed by all this information. And AI now gives us this ability to action it, to say, all right, not only can I maybe analyze this and classify this for you so that we can then get it into a pipeline in our business, but I can also help you make that decision. I can even help you find outcomes and decisions you didn't even think of. Right? That's kind of on the more advanced side of things. And so what we're seeing is businesses think this is going to be key to unlocking a lot of the untapped value that they have, that they're not performing as well as they could. And so that's really kind of in a nutshell what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's such a good point too. I'm glad you brought that up about all this data that's sitting out there, right? And you have all, especially companies that have been around for a while, you have all of this ERP data, like your SAP data, PeopleSoft, et cetera. You have tons and tons of customer data. And I know Verint works in customer experience, so maybe we'll focus on customer data a bit. You can find all kinds of things in your historical data. You can profile, for example, your customers and put them into groups that make sense. So you can segment them. I talked about segmenting or classification, really. Which group does this person belong in, that person? Lots of different algorithms can do that. But the idea is that you can get these optimal groups or segments to market things to. And if you have AI and you use it effectively, that can really help you figure out who those people are. So you're not making sort of arbitrary gut decisions about who to put in this category. You're looking at the data and letting the algorithm suggest to you, hey, these 3,200 people out of your 50,000 names seem to be most interested in this particular topic. Why don't you market to them first? It's that kind of practical application that can really get some bang for the buck. What do you think, Dion?
I could not agree more. In fact, what we're really seeing is it'll help us understand our customers better. We'll use a lot of the data we're just not using to improve our marketing and our sales and even the products and services themselves. But really the goal is where this is going to end up is real-time personalization, AI that actually sits inside your relationship with the company and improves it based on everything it knows about you and everything that happens in that experience. It learns from that and creates eventually we'll all have one-to-one personalized, individualized experiences. But right now, our limits of our technology really says it's going to be around personas. But the promise is that really we're going to get the kinds of relationships and have the kinds of experiences generated just for us. AI is taking us on that journey. And so that's really the end goal there. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, AI is taking us on the journey. I love this. And there's so much untapped potential in all of that data. And, we've heard some big companies talking about this for a while. SAP a few years ago, when I met Dion at one of these events, was talking about supply chain. And they talked about it as like a customer of one or a supply chain of one. They were alluding to the same thing of hyper personalization, really learning who you are and tracking your behavior. And so not just grouping you into a big chunk of people who might be similar to you. No, like actually paying attention to you and what you buy. Now, it takes time to do that. It takes energy. It takes computational power, right? These different algorithms have different taxes, if you will, on your systems, on your compute, on your data, et cetera. But maybe let's talk about that first stage where you point an algorithm at a bunch of data. You want to make sure it's the right data. You want to make sure the algorithm should have access to that data and from a governance perspective. But that discovery process is pretty interesting. And I think it starts by looking at the different groups and looking at the different kinds of behavior. And then your team will kind of dive in on that. Look, these people like to buy products at 1 o'clock in the morning. What can we learn about them? And you kind of dig deeper and deeper, iteratively, I should say, to find what works. And then obviously what you want to do is when you find something that works, you kind of amplify that out, right, Dion?
Exactly right. And so really training AIs and having these pools of machine learning agents where you're teaching it, using your proprietary information. You want to have your AI, your algorithm better trained and better able to make smart insights or better decisions or whatever. But the world continues to change, and so the real challenge is how do I keep my AI better and smarter than the competition so that it serves my customers better, my workers, and my suppliers. That's really the next competitive advantage. We're seeing the real advances like on the cutting edge of the space and like self-driving automobiles where they take literally tens of millions of driving experiences and force the AI to learn from them and see what decisions that human driver makes. And somebody had to sit there and say, this was a good decision, this was a bad decision. So, and we want you to learn from that, and they teach the AI. And so there's these big, learning farms that you have where you're teaching your AI how to make the decisions you hope it will make in a new situation that it learns from experience and then can apply that in a new situation for you automatically without a human there. Unattended machine learning and unattended delivery of the insights and decision making that can unleash almost unlimited value. Elon Musk said they realized that training a self-driving car really created an AI that learned how to navigate the world, and now they're now using that technology elsewhere. They have a new robot called Optimus that's based on all that machine learning because they realized, well, we've created an AI that can navigate through the world. We might as well use that elsewhere. So the possibilities are really amazing, and they're kind of limitless.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll throw one more question over to you, and then we'll bring Jaime in. You talked about needing to train the models and stay on top of them. And of course, COVID came around. And one of the interesting storylines a couple months after the pandemic really began in earnest was that customer behavior went out the window, meaning everyone started doing things differently. And so the algorithms that you had to predict human behavior before the pandemic just didn't really work once the pandemic kicked into gear. So that's a classic example of how external factors can alter behavior and thus throw off your algorithms, right, Dion?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Eric. And really, there is a shelf life on all of these machine learning models in a very low variability, slow changing field might last for a few months or a few years or maybe even longer. But if you're really in a hyper-competitive environment, and anyone who's in the online space is in a hyper-competitive environment, and that's now everybody, really need algorithms, and you need a learning farm that is continuously updating what you know with your latest data, and then turning that back into your business. So yeah, it's a process that never ends. It's a marathon, but it's just something you have to do on the side. And unless you're trying to create self-driving, it's not going to be even a major investment. It's something you have to make sure you're doing and managing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, let's bring in Jaime Meritt from Verint, and that company is Verint. They do a lot of customer experience stuff. Jaime, tell us a bit about yourself and Verint and how you folks are leveraging AI to improve customer experience and do other stuff.
Wonderful. Well, my name is Jaime Meritt. I'm a Chief Product Officer at Verint. And I've been looking and studying and researching AI. I think back to my college days, which is a really long time ago. AI has been around for a very long time, but it's hit that point of hyper acceleration over the last decade because computing has become ubiquitously available. I can get the largest and most computer machinery in the world available to me, just by sitting in a coffee shop and using Amazon. So I do think AI, not only the AI methodologies, but fundamentally the approachability of AI and the ability for someone, anyone in a software company or anyone with an idea to leverage AI to solve their problems has really changed dramatically. And that's what's brought us into this new renaissance of AI. But I'm now starting to sound like the marketing guys that we're talking about in the beginning. So it's, at Verint, a lot of, we build software that's focused on customer engagement. We have many different applications across our cloud platform, and we imbue AI across them really to help people solve core problems. In general, everything we do with Verint is about making customer engagement easier, more automated, and allowing our customers to do more with less. So we talk about the engagement capacity gap, how the volume of interactions, the variability of interactions, the way your customers want to engage with your company has changed dramatically and over the last few years. But budgets and people aren't changing as quickly as the rest of the world is changing. So how do you deal with that increased volume in engagement How do you deal with all the different types of ways customers want to engage with you? Well, AI helps us work with our customers and solve problems that help them close that engagement capacity gap and let them do better customer engagement, more optimal outcomes, and do more with that same staff and with that same spend, or even reduce spend, but make super employees out of employees. So in general, AI is always solving an important problem for our customers. And in general, it's about leveraging automation and AI to do more with less and close that engagement capacity gap.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff in there. And I'd like to pick on one thing in particular that you pointed out, which is that there's so much more data. There are so many more channels, and we only got a couple minutes left in this opening segment, but let's talk about omni-channel and channel expansion. If you want to talk about a fantastic use case for AI, it's looking through your data, your customer engagements, and figuring out who engages where. Some people prefer email, some people prefer LinkedIn direct messages, some people prefer text messages, some people prefer the phone, believe it or not, or direct mail or whatever it is. So you can scan your CRM systems and see who engages in which capacity and then focus on that channel for them. I mean, it's a simple thing, but wow, what a powerful thing to do, right, Jaime?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you think about where were you just going with Dion before around hyper personalization and getting down to that persona of one, that's a lot of what you're trying to do. You know, how do I understand someone's channel preferences, not only based on their history, like what I know about them specifically, but also what I know about their demographics, their peer group, you know, based on, you know, different demographics, whether it's age, whether it's location, you know, they're generally going to prefer certain channels, certain types of data they want to be contacted. And AI is fantastic at actually discovering those types of patterns. When you have this massive data and you're trying to create many, many different categorizations and clustering across all these different users, AI is tremendous at solving that problem, because you have what do you need? You have a wealth of data. That's really important. 60. And you can define what good outcomes look like. You can define this customer was happy. We resolved their issue on the first discussion. They said they gave us a good NPS score after it. You have ways of actually judging the outcome that says, you know, this interaction was good because we chose the right channel. We contacted them at the right time. You know, so I do think leveraging AI to understand channel preferences, to understand when you engage, is a tremendous use of it, and it balances. It's a simple outcome, but it leverages that volume of data that you have to get a great answer.
That's right. We'll pick that up after the break, folks. Talking to Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation and Jaime Meritt of Verint, all about artificial intelligence. Be reasonable, practical applications. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, take us to the future. Indeed, we're back here on the show talking to Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research and Jaime Meritt of Verint, talking all about artificial intelligence and how to use it, what to do with it, the value that you can get. And Jaime, I'll throw it back over to you to talk about the data, because you do need enough data. And I was thinking before the show to myself, you know, the human intelligence needs data. You can't learn without data. That's what you use. It's all the little constructs, the bits and pieces that you form together in your mind, and you make relationships between things. You understand contrast, disparity, so on and so forth. So you need data and information to have intelligence. You learn about the real world around you. Well, if a human being needs data to learn, well, so does an algorithm, right? These algorithms, they can be very clever. They can be overwrought. There are some interesting stories in the news lately about like the Zillow algorithm that went off the rails and some other algorithms that haven't done so well. Back in the past, there was Microsoft's Tay, their little AI chatbot they unleashed on the world that got into some pretty nasty conversations quickly. So you do have to be very careful about what you do with these things. And the key is the data. Do you have enough data to train the algorithms? And then you look for, it seems to me, either success stories or failures, and you try to improve in either category. But first, you have to have enough data. Tell us about that, Jaime of Verint.
You know, I think that's whenever I'm looking at a new AI project, you know, that's really my first question is do we have enough data to really to make progress quick enough here, right? So for AI to be successful, it's it's different than the way we used to do programming, where the answer, it's very declarative. It is more like educating a child. It is showing them the environment, showing them the system, and allowing the AI algorithm to learn patterns and discover patterns inside of that data that lead it to a conclusion that you might not know how it got to that conclusion. So the process is very different, and the process is very much around having sufficient data that is indicative of all the examples you're looking at, being able to describe what a good outcome is and what a bad outcome is, potentially even having a way of scoring that, saying the quality of the answer. Let's say we're trying to build some kind of prediction, right? I need to know what a good answer looks like. So if I'm trying to predict from this customer, often, as I said, we deal with customer engagement. So very often I'm listening to and watching a customer talking to an employee, or a customer talking to a self-service chatbot, and trying to understand, is this a successful engagement with the customer? Are they satisfied with this experience? And I might measure that based on CSAT. I might measure that based on NPS. I might measure that by asking them a very specific question at the end, but I have a way of understanding what the outcome is that I'm looking for. And then I have millions of different interactions that I could turn an AI algorithm loose on. And then it develops a model which says, based on its understanding of all this data, it's identified these are the salient characteristics that its model is going to be based on. And it's going to be able to deliver predictions that say, this conversation is leading to a highly successful outcome, right? So that's one part of this, is the ability to have the volume of data in a format that's accessible and understandable to an AI algorithm, and a way of measuring, when an AI algorithm has an output, this model leads to this outcome. We can actually say this is a good or a bad outcome, because what you're doing with AI is like a child. You're training it, you're nurturing it, and it's getting better over time. It's a process, it's an education. It's not a single point in time, a single event. So what you're doing is those models are effectively, this is the AI's best understanding of how to answer whatever question you're asking. It comes to a conclusion, and then I can say that's the right conclusion or a wrong conclusion. And based on that feedback cycle, it makes more and more predictions that lead to that correct conclusion. So that education process requires, not, as Dion was saying earlier, lots of machinery, lots of infrastructure, but it really is as simple as, the model is trying to answer a question about the data. It's trying to answer a new question you've given it based on its history. And you're able to say, based on the outcome, was it good or bad? And then the more, if you have, that's basically your accuracy of your AI model. So you're watching over time as the input data changes, the accuracy and the predictions can change and can start drifting. And you're continuously re-educating that model. So you're always giving the best possible answer based on the latest and greatest data as it flows in. And it's built on that long history of analyzing and understanding the data historically. So it makes better and better outcomes.
Yeah, the human must always stay in the loop. I mean, you can have some parts that are automated. We heard Dion talk about how automation and AI are top of mind for senior executives these days. But you always want to be gauging, is it working well? Is it working poorly? That scoring comes in handy. And you always have to have a baseline. Like, what are we comparing this against? And you always have to be changing that baseline. And you brought up the chatbots. I think that's an excellent topic to dive into a bit. So I'll throw this over to you, and then we'll bring Dion in to comment on it. But natural language processing has come a very, very long way. Siri and Bixby notwithstanding, sometimes they get the idea or they get the text wrong, or et cetera. We have to deal with that, obviously. But it's really coming along, and chatbots done effectively can tackle 80% of the requests that come in, because they're simple stuff like, what's your address, when are you open, simple questions like that. And you can now build these really cool decision trees for the chatbots to use, and then modify them over time. Okay, if you ask this, do that. If you ask that, do this. That can get pretty powerful. But when they first came out, they probably weren't as well equipped as they should have been, and they just kind of irked people. You don't want that. That's the negative reinforcement that tells you, hey, let's stop this, let's pull the plug and fine tune it a bit more to where people get it. And that way they get an immediate response. They don't have to wait on the phone. No one wants to do that. So it can be very powerful if you do it right. What do you think about that, Jaime?
Oh, 100%. I mean, Amtrak's a good customer example of ours that works with us for our conversational AI, right? And when they started on this journey with us, they were really nervous about introducing a chatbot. This is years ago. This is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was. They want very limited use cases to go to the chatbot. And then more and more, we're going to be sending things over to the contact center because we want to have a very a perfect customer experience, or whatever the best customer experience we can. So they started with the chatbot for very, very limited interactions. Let's how do I change a ticket? How do I change my password? Maybe some small informational and small transactional things. And over the years, they've added more and more intents that they recognize to that chatbot. And now that chatbot is their best salesperson. So the person that sells and bundle, it's because of the way AI works in some ways, because we went through that nurturing and education process. So as conversations evolved, we continued to evolve and hone and tune that chatbot on the latest and greatest available information. But also the great part about AI is it's unbiased and consistent. So your agents aren't always necessarily trying to upsell. Maybe they want to end the call really quickly because they want to move on to the next one because they're being measured that way. So what was interesting is it's not only the conversational AI and how that's advanced that's made Amtrak so successful in that scenario, but it's also you can tell the chatbot what to do and keep them doing it consistently. So they'll always offer additional options and upsells. Maybe you want to buy first class. They'll follow policy to the letter. And it's led to that being the most successful sales rep for Amtrak is our chatbot.
That's a really cool story. And I'll throw this over to Dion. We're talking about natural language processing getting so much better these days. But also with these chatbots, you can track because you get all the data. So you know when they came into the chat, how long they stayed in the chat. Was there a successful outcome to the chat? Did this person buy something or do something good? Or was there an unsuccessful result? Did they, click out and they never did anything? Whatever. You can look at every last bit of that data because it's all captured. So then when the chatbot says, maybe you would like to do this or that, comes up with some recommendation, that seems to work very well. Now you're kind of helping this chatbot kind of inch along to become the greatest salesperson for Amtrak, like Jaime is saying. Dion, I think that's just fascinating stuff. It does require management, but the potential is tremendous, right?
Well, it is tremendous, and the data shows it too. So we used to have things called call centers because that was primarily how we supported customers. They would call us, right? And now we have two generations of people that they would mostly not like to call. They want to use a digital touch point to get information if it's good, right? So there was some criticism of early chatbots were really quite simple and didn't help, and people didn't want to talk to a human. But they are steadily improving, and the data from McKinsey and others shows that the single most expensive way to service a customer, is to use a person to do it. And using automated tools, self-service is another powerful way, but chatbots are they're the new phone menu that we actually like. The new phone directory menu where they say press all the following numbers. Right. Now you can just ask for it using plain simple language that in the way that you like, and increasingly in the channel you prefer. Right. I mean, we're seeing these chatbots appear on web pages as soon as we show up. I don't like it when they start the conversation. Right. But if they're providing value and they're the easiest channel to use, I like them, and the data shows that they do work when you have a good AI behind them, and that's the whole key. A chatbot has to be smart. There has to be intelligence behind it. It has to be well trained. It has to be able to handle a large amount of language variability in the way that customers ask for things, because customers don't use the same lingo that our system analysts use, or our developers use, or our business people. We all have all these insider terms. We forget they have their own names for everything, right? So you really do have to watch those conversations. You need to train them with real people. But when you do that, you can service people faster, far cheaper, we see the customer satisfaction is consistently higher with high quality chatbots. And you can offer an overall cheaper and better service to your customer. And that means customer attraction and retention is higher. Right. So it's the customer relationship is now becoming primarily digital. AI is mediating that, and it can really improve the process.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just thinking here, talking to you guys, it just dawned on me a fantastic use case for this technology is being able to weed out the bots. And that's kind of ironic because it's a bot on the page, but there are tons and tons of bots. I'm a digital marketer. I have been for 20 plus years now. And I've seen the sort of arc go up and then back down in terms of the data and its value. And what I mean by that is it was way up high early in the game until everyone figured out how to game the system. Then it kind of went down, then we got better and went back up again. But what's happened is that there are so many bots now crawling all around on the web. There are all sorts of spam filters and firewalls checking out your email that come in. That looks like clicks. It looks like people. It's not people. It's bots. And so the bot on your site can help you understand who's a bot and who's not, because you don't want to be wasting time talking to a bot. You want to be talking to people. So that's just one of the many benefits, right, Jaime?
Yeah, no, I would say that's, identifying any patterns in web traffic. So often, when we're trying to understand the digital experience, we're trying to identify digital struggle, right? So what are the signs of a customer that's struggling with the web experience? Right? How do and that's a pattern of usage. So some cases they're doing things like they're called rage clicking. Where if I watch my kids use a website or something, they do rage clicking and they keep clicking over. I'm like, it's like the elevator button, right? You don't need to keep clicking on it. But those patterns, that are identifying struggle can also help you understand, is that a human? Is that a bot? Bots behave very differently than humans. The way they type, the way that, every way they engage and navigate a site, and the stream of basically website information, web session information is different and unique to a bot. So yeah, I think that's a great AI problem because you're looking for a pattern in a stream of data. And there's very unique types of, what that stream would look like, the shape of that stream would look like from a bot versus a human. And similarly, as I said, we use it for struggle detection and other types of identifying interesting patterns. What is a good, an agent that's talking to a customer in the contact center, to use Dion's example of the old world, is, what makes them really successful? What processes and practices do they have that the rest of the agents should be doing? We watch what's going on their desktop while they're servicing a call and engaging with a customer. So we can say this great agent with this great outcomes actually went to this tool first and this tool second and did this neat little trick here. So it's that stream of information, that data has all the value in it. And AI is the only one that can recognize the type of sophisticated patterns we're looking for in that data. To say what good looks like, right? So it's another great example. It's also similar probably to bot detection.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And so you want to understand success, you want to understand failure, and then model for it and look around for ways to improve. We've had this concept of best practices in business for decades. I mean, if not hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, if you really get down to brass tacks, right? They figured out how to build the pyramids long before we had computers. So, maybe it was aliens, maybe it was people who were smart, but best practices have been around a long time. But now we can capture all the data about the best practices and know exactly precisely, specifically what a successful engagement looks like, what an unsuccessful engagement looks like. You have to capture the data, leverage the data, train your algorithms on the data, and then manage it over time. And you're just going to get better and better at this stuff, folks. But don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, your host, Eric Kavanaugh, with you, talking today to Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research and Jaime Meritt of a company called Verint, talking all about artificial intelligence, AI, and reasonable expectations for AI. And we left off talking again about chatbots and how you can use these chatbots. I mean, really, there's so many things that you can improve with AI. Maybe let's get into the sort of how-to. I'll throw it over to Jaime first. I think the key is to really do the discovery process on your data, figure out what you have, and work with a partner. Obviously, if you haven't done this stuff, either the vendor that supplies it or a consulting firm that has experience doing this thing, work with them and focus on the pain points, right? Like we talk about customer experience. So let's think about lost customers, churn, customer churn. All right, we lost this customer. What happened? Go look at that data, examine the data, look for the patterns in that data. And there are simple things, right? Like with a phone, with telco companies, they focus very intently on customer churn, dropped calls. He sent a text message to support. He sent an email. He called the call center. It didn't go very well. And then he left. Well, you can find that pattern and then early in the pattern say, this guy's leaning towards churning. Let's throw him a deal. Let's throw him an offer, 20% off, get a new phone, whatever. It's that kind of thing that can remediate the churn tendency, right, Jaime?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that it speaks to another interesting change that's going on, is that the shift has been more and more to apply. I guess historically we would look at customers, we'd profile them, and we'd say, who do we think is at risk of churning? And then we'd send them an email campaign, we'd send them a promotion offering, things like that. But there's a long cycle time in the they're in our marketing database, and then we're going to run a program and we're going to look for at-risk customers. So lately, what we've been seeing is taking that same mindset of, let me understand across my customer base who's churning, who's at risk of churning. Let's create a churn model that helps identify churn in real time. And then let's make sure that when we're talking to and we're engaging with that customer, that we can give you notifications. Like we do a lot of work with real-time agent assist. How do I let an agent understand when he's talking to an at-risk customer, in order to, or he's communicating with them over digital channels or a variety of different means, but I'm engaging with a customer, and based on some things they're saying or patterns that we recognize, we think they're at risk at churning, you should give them an offer right now. So I think that process of leverage AI to identify what are the different characteristics of churn, and shifting from let's do that across our marketing database to let's make sure we're leveraging that AI in real time so that we can dive and catch in a bad interaction and in a bad engagement. How do we help our agents or our staff or our employees in any way know that this customer is at risk? And
Right.
Here's an option that might help based on past performance. We know this option helps this profile of customer. So you're doing, you're basically shifting from leveraging AI to shift from a batch and sort of mindset, a marketing mindset and campaign mindset, to how do I do real-time recovery of engagements and prevent churn before the customer even considers going somewhere else. They might not even know they're at risk of churn before You've already given them something to let them, to encourage them never to leave.
That's brilliant. That's exactly right. And I'll throw this over to Dion. What's really exciting too is there are companies that are getting into this whole space now. And I'm not sure if Verint is or not, but maybe Jaime can tell us, but understanding sentiment, even tone of voice when you're on a call, right? Because everyone says, this call may be recorded for quality assurance. Like, oh, okay. And also to make sure that you can fire someone if they piss off the wrong customer, right? But the point is you can capture that. When the voice is elevating, guess what? There's like, uh-oh, bing, 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 set off the alarms, send in the troops to save this. What do you think, Dion?
Well, you can train an AI as long as there's data for it. You can train it for it. So sentiment is absolutely a way of improving your AI algorithm if you can do it. So natural language processing helps. It's interesting. We see that there are training tools. There's a process called design thinking that actually uses the self-reported state of that user. Here's how I feel in this step of the system. I feel very powerless, or I feel like I can't achieve what I want to get done, or I wasn't serviced correctly. And you use that emotional state to actually train first design the system around the emotional state, and then you train the system around the same thing. And that's really an empathetic approach to AI and approach to a customer experience. Can have a much higher impact than just using the words that they use. If you have to take that full context and that the empathy you have for the state of your customer, and using any kind of signal you can to then teach the AI what to do. So there are signals that the AI can receive that the person's very frustrated, and it might make sense for the AI to actually deal with that frustration first. Like, I'm going to try and do everything I can to help you. I hear you're frustrated. Can
Right.
really deflate the situation. And you wouldn't expect an AI normally to be able to do that, but it can actually be trained to do that.
Wow.
And that makes these systems much more human too, when they're actually paying attention to our emotional state and our feelings, and they're actually empathetic with us. They've been trained that way. You can have a much better experience. So that's at the cutting edge, but I actually see teams doing this. They're doing it with design thinking, which is having deep empathy for the customer and their needs. And then you can do it with the AI actually in the customer experience to respond to the needs, the emotional needs of that customer, which makes them much easier to deal with, and they're much happier as a result.
Yeah, that's right. And Jamie, I'll throw this over to you. One nice thing about the AI is it doesn't get offended, right? You're not gonna push the AI's buttons and like, oh, how dare you criticize me, right? Go ahead,
AI,
Jamie.
it consistently applies the rules, no matter what you tell it to do or what it thinks it should do. It's going to consistently do it every time. But yeah, no, this is a fantastic topic, because it's so close to the types of work we do in customer engagement, where sentiment's a great example, where linguistically positive and negative words certainly, but there's so much in the discussion, in the acoustics, in the timing,
Right.
in all those different aspects of the conversation that go beyond just the words they're saying. The tone of the voice, the tone of the sentence, the pitch, interrupting. There's many of these
That's right.
indicators. And we have customers that are like health insurers, is a great example, where they want to make sure that some conversations, the ones the nurses are having, for example, are handled with extreme empathy. Right. And they use tools from Verint and part of our ecosystem in order to really understand, are we carrying out the conversation the best way for the customer? And that has a lot to way more to do than the words you just said, the way you deliver it, the tone of voice, the speed, just the certain things you say to acknowledge feelings, like Dion was going down, the thing I want to say to really de-escalate the situation if it's escalated. There's a tremendous amount you can learn by watching the conversation and listening to it in the fullness, right? So in some ways, the more data and more data points you give to an AI, the better your outcomes could be. So we started sentiment with just linguistics, but we added on acoustics to help us understand all these other dimensions of the call and the interaction that don't have to do with just the words that are said.
Right. That's just fascinating. And you can learn a lot from these things too. You can learn how people behave. And I think that's the key, right? I'll throw this over to Dion. When you put these technologies in place and you start learning from the sentiment, from the acoustics, from everything, you're going to learn a lot more about your business. And frankly, you learn about yourself, right? One of the hardest things to do in life is to learn about yourself. And you really have to listen to other people point things out about you, because you have the ultimate bias in the world about yourself, because of course you're the greatest ever. So it helps to get that external feedback to see, and just to watch how you work. I mean, when people start seeing the patterns that the computers see, you're like, wow, am I really that predictable? Yes, you are. But real quick, Dion, what do you think about all that? 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. I think I've been on the show before where we talked about it's only the unblinking gaze of the machines can look at all of our data. And,
That's right.
And the challenge is reducing the biases that we don't want to have. We actually want our AI to be biased towards the good things, right? And unbiased when it can be dangerous. And that's really the challenge. Is we built these things so they still have a lens that kind of is contaminated by us. And so we're getting better at building unbiased AI, and that's really the challenge about what you're saying. Is it's still kind of a funhouse reflection a little bit, and we have to be careful that we're using AI as explainable, that it's ethical. I have some clients that they have major investments. They run every deal they do through an ethical AI process to make sure criminals aren't going to use this very powerful technology for no good. Right. So, it's all these things. It's an amazingly powerful tool, but it's a two-edged sword, like all technology. And so, we live in a time, everything is a time of enormous risk and enormous opportunity. And we really got to reduce the risks and tackle the opportunity. That's the big payoff in AI. And we've got to get good at this, and we have a bright future if we do.
I love it. Folks, we'll be talking to Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research and Jaime Meritt of Verint. Look these folks up online. Podcast bonus segment coming up next. You're listening to Inside Analysis. Okay, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis. On today's show, we're talking to Dion Hinchcliffe of Constellation Research and Jaime Meritt of Verint. And we wanted to talk a bit about this AI maturity model and just kind of knowing where you are as an organization in the data that you have, your proficiency using AI, what opportunities you have to leverage it. You kind of have to know where you are in the process to know where to dedicate resources. Do we need to clean our data? Do we need to bring in some experts to help us? Do we need to talk to the frontline workers to figure out where their pain points are? All of this kind of comes into play as you figure out how to be reasonable and set practical expectations for AI. What do you think, Jaime?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think, very often when I'm starting an AI conversation with a company that's about to get into it, their first mindset is, oh, I need to go out and I need to hire 50 data scientists and create, create my big data lake. And they start going down this whole infrastructure path and skill sets and PhDs and research. Look, I build teams like that, and I think it's an important way of building and developing your own AI. But you can get value from AI well before you build out this tremendous research function and hire in 50 PhDs and 50 data scientists, right? Your applications, I build applications every day that I think, we think about as AI embedded. We've delivered AI capabilities, but made them easy for our users to take advantage of because they're built into the application. In some cases, they know they're using AI. In some cases, at least from oh yeah, I use AI, and what I'm doing requires AI. But they're not. They don't need to be data scientists. They don't need to be spending their time tuning those algorithms. That's my job, right? So as a vendor of applications, we bring AI and embed AI in various products across our cloud platform. Then there's, I would say, the AI services. So you don't even need to build some of your core AI algorithms. Even before I have data scientists, as long as I have developers, all of my cloud vendors have AI built into their cloud platform. If I go to my Amazons or my Googles of the world or Salesforce or of course Verint, we all deliver and package up our API, our services and AI capabilities as APIs. So then, even if I don't have a data scientist on staff, but I'm a general IT team or I'm a team of developers trying to build something new, they take advantage of our AI services as the way to embed AI in their application, once again, without having to understand the full practice around creating those algorithms themselves. And then finally, there's those that are building AI core algorithms, new models, training them to be market leading, et cetera. That's where you start bringing in a data science capability. You start developing your own data lake. You start remembering and recording and having all of your data available for research. But that's way down the path when you're starting to build your own AI. But don't think you can't take advantage of AI today with your current staff and your current applications, with your current IT partners. There's plenty of ways of starting to leverage AI in the things you do without having to go and hire 50 PhDs.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent piece of advice too. I'll throw it over to Dion. Crawl, walk, run. With this stuff, more than with even other types of data initiatives like data warehousing and so forth, you always want to start slowly, but with AI especially, because well begun is half done. That's one of my favorite cliches. You don't hear it much these days, but if you get off on the right track, you're gonna really increase your chances for success. What do you think, Dion?
I believe that is correct. And so I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time with big companies and their IT departments and look at who's doing well, who's not doing well. And there's this really stark pattern we see in organizations that are able to more immediately use things like artificial intelligence or build new digital customer experiences that are infused with machine learning and AI. And that the maturity factor is their ability to get to their data. That they have a strong data foundation, that they've really opened up their silos, they've solved their data ownership. Because what happens in most organizations is that each department thinks they own that data, they control it, and they don't want to set it free inside the organization, lose control of it. They're always afraid of that. And so everyone hoards their data. They hold it really close, and they own those IT systems that they pay for, and they don't want to give it to anybody. But digital maturity organizations have solved the physical access problems and said, let's build APIs around this. Let's collect master data. Let's a customer data platform, because we're powered by data now. That's the most valuable asset that we have in the organization. It's the most irreplaceable asset. So we're going to open that up, and then we're also going to get rid of the cultural issues around data hoarding and ownership. And those high maturity organizations, they're doing much better with AI because they can go and get to the data, and no one's going to try and smack their hand or take it away or say, I'm not, you're using my license, I don't want to pay for it. They've gotten rid of all of those problems. They've built a strong foundation, and the organizations that have a strong data foundation have a much higher maturity in digital, and correspondingly, they're going to have much higher success with AI. And that's the pattern that I see clearly over and over again.
Yeah, that's, well, first things first, right? I mean, you can't get anywhere without the data. And so if you make sure that you responsibly liberate that data, you have some data governance, you have people pay attention to things. There are lots of really good technologies in that space today as well, focused on governance, but make sure that the foundation is there. Because and I'll give you just one last comment that I'll throw out here, and look these folks up online, folks, Dion, Hinchcliffe, and Jaime Meritt from Verint. But data is the bricks. Data are the bricks that you use to build your models. Without that foundation, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anything done. But to Jamie's point, you can just go rent this stuff. You don't have to try to, and you shouldn't try to build it all yourself. Goodness gracious, don't start there unless you have a really robust team and a lot of maturity on that team.
Most people shouldn't build their own software. Exactly. They should probably buy something, most likely. They shouldn't be building their own software. And you probably shouldn't be building your own AI. Someone has already figured out probably an 80% solution for your industry, and then you can do ML on the last 20% that is specific to your business. But you can get that high maturity AI that's already been hardened and tested and proven in a million situations with all the edge cases figured out, and then do that last mile of machine learning and training, and that's a much better model most of the time.
I love it. Well, folks, you've been listening to Inside Analysis. Take care. Bye-bye.